Hello team, welcome to day 2 of performance testing training. So before beginning session today, whatever questions you have during the session, you keep to your side first of all, then we will take up 10-15 minutes at the end of the session to discuss all your queries, okay, so that the flow won't be break. So let's start our day 2 session. We will see today's agenda. Okay, so today we will see day 1 review, what we covered on day 1 of performance testing training. We will see URL first of all to download roadrunner software. Okay, so you can all download the software on your machine, and we would see project 1 session 2, what we are going to cover in that. Okay, so in day 1, like we covered all the things, what to expect at the end of the training, who is this training for, then prerequisites, what will be covered, performance testing introduction, and like we have just seen introduction to project 1. Okay, that is hotels.com. So before beginning our day 2 session, let me just tell you like how do we install, where to install Loadrunner software. Okay, so that you will be all able to install that particular software. So I have provided you a link. So you just need to go to that link and click on trials and demos, and you need to click on HP Loadrunner 11.5 media evaluation, so that it will be getting downloaded on your system and you would be ready to work with Loadrunner. Okay, so I will be providing this link to all of you. Okay. So let's begin with our project 1 session 2. So yesterday we have seen some of the basic concepts of performance testing. Okay, so today we will see what approach do we follow whenever a performance testing project comes to us. So we have already taken hotels.com as our first project. So suppose hotels.com is coming to our end for performance testing. So what approach we should follow? Now before beginning the approach, let me tell you, there are some phases in performance testing which every testing has. Okay, so we will see first is the requirement gathering phase, then next is, let me write here, the requirement gathering phase. The next is test planning phase. Next is script creation phase. Next is script execution phase. Team, are you able to hear me? script execution phase, and lastly is the analysis phase. Okay. So like whenever a project comes in, so hotels.com is coming to our site for performance testing. So we have to follow this entire phase for this performance testing project. Okay. So in requirement gathering phase, we like gather some information about the application. So what it is, we will see today, so that before starting our scripting phase, we should be ready with our requirement gathering phase and the test planning phase. Okay, so we will see what questions we need to ask to client so that we have a better understanding of our application, so that it will be easy for us to, when we execute our scenarios, like the scripts, then what measures, performance criteria we need to have for that particular application, we will be able to understand perfectly. Okay, so let me open an Excel sheet. Also, like this requirement gathering phase, during this requirement gathering phase and test planning phase, we will also get to know what type of performance tests we are going to perform. So we will see how do we come to a conclusion. Okay, this information is required for the particular application, and like which performance test we need to perform. Okay, so first of all, when we can write the application name as application under test, you can say it's hotels.com. Okay. Now we have to see whether it's browser-based application or a desktop application. So yeah, we are saying that okay, it's a browser-based application. Okay, so we can say we can note it down. Type of application. Okay, it's browser-based application. So like before going to scripting, it's very important for us to understand like our requirements, what are the requirements of our application, so that it would be helpful in generating or writing a test plan, okay, which is like very important during the initial phase of any performance testing project. Okay, so first of all, once we like know, okay, application under test is going to be hotels.com and the type of application is going to be browser-based application. Okay, so like once we are know that it is a browser-based application, we will try to find out, okay, which is the communication protocol used, like by which method this application communicates with the server side. Okay, so we will try to find out communication protocol. So here in this case we have HTTP communication protocol. Okay, as we would be using an HTTP HTML web protocol for recording this script. Okay. Now next set of questions, like we would ask, what is the objective of the application for performance testing? Okay, objective of performance testing for hotels.com. Now, like as we are going to take questions like at the end of the session, 10-15 minutes, so that like the flow is not broken. Okay, so I will answer all your queries. Don't worry, team. Okay, so all those things. So we have seen like what is the objective of performance testing for hotels.com. Okay, so like as this is a new application to us, but like we can ask client, okay, whether this is a new application or do you have like added any group functionality, new functionality? So which functionality is that, or any server migration is occurring, or any hardware changes are there for the server. So like there are certain objectives that like depends why a client is coming to us for performance testing of a particular application. So like new application, then either enhancement or new functionality you can say, hardware changes, server migration. Okay, so there can be a lot of objectives for like whenever application comes to you for performance testing. Okay, so based on this actually like we decide what type of execution we are going to do. Either, so we can mention it here, types of performance testing for hotels.com. Okay, now the requirement is that we need to test, okay, let me write here, need to test hotels.com for peak load of 500 users. Okay, now this is my like objective. This I want to test hotels.com for peak load. Okay, so what does peak load means? So suppose now as an example of our session, right? So we know that okay, like from 6:30 a.m. Pacific to 7:30 a.m. Pacific session is going to be conducted. So like at that particular time, most of them would be joining the session. Okay, so you can say that is the peak load. Like at a certain time, the users are doing some kind of activity. Or you can say, suppose a university in case of hotels.com. Okay, so like Christmas season or any New Year season. So like at that particular time, most of the users would booking up the packages and flights for their holidays. Okay, so in case of like hotels.com, this is the main like peak load time where users would be accessing or booking the hotels very at a greater frequency because they have holidays during the Christmas and like New Year. So we need to like depending on the objective, this is like we need to test for 500 users for hotels.com. So we would suggest client, okay, we would do a load test. So load test is the simplest form of performance test that we perform under a particular workload. You can say expected peak load, that is 500 users. Okay, to measure the response time, throughput. Okay, so like in this case, suppose I want to like have a response time of this search functionality. Okay, so in how much time it is responding me, like whether it's 4 seconds or 5 seconds or anything. Okay, so we need to know before beginning, we need to know the objective of performance test so that we can decide upon types of test. So next is like type of test you can have endurance test. So mainly to find out memory leaks for the application. It's a longer duration test, okay. To find out memory leaks. So like suppose my client says, okay, like we want, this is a critical application, okay, and it is running 24/7, but we fear that if it runs like continuously for that particular time, it might face some issues. Okay, so we need to find out actually which issues are coming to that particular application if we run for a longer duration. So in that particular case, we can suggest a client that, okay, do endurance test for hotels.com. Okay, so it could be like 10 hours duration, 12 hours duration, depending on your criticality of the application. So this application is like 24/7 available, and it's also critical, like during a holiday season, like Christmas, New Year, you can say, or like in general seasons where like people go on holidays at a time. So like this particular criteria helps us in deciding what type of test we are going to do. Again, like there is a stress test. Okay, so here we do to find the breaking point of the application. Okay. Now, like how come in case of hotels.com, suppose client is expecting, okay, 500 users will be coming to the application. But now, at a certain point in a day, at a certain point, if suppose 1,000 users are coming to your application, then what would happen? Like your system would break down or your server would crash. Okay, so that is the case. Like we also need to find out the breaking point, like elasticity as a simple example. Okay, so you stretch the rubber and at a point it breaks. So in similar to here application, we need to find out, okay, how many users actually the application is supporting if sudden load is getting on the application. Okay, this is a sudden load stress test. Like it is, we are stressing the application with more and more users. Okay, so we have to like decide which type of test we actually do for any application, like in case of our hotels.com, so that we will be able to determine exactly like the objective of the application, like why we are doing it, and we can give the measurements to the client. Measure the response time, like throughput. Throughput means the bytes received from the server. Okay. Okay. So like all these things helps us actually. Now next objective is like we will ask client is benchmark available. Okay. So what does it mean? So hotels.com, like it is like they have created a new version. A new version is there in the market. So already for the previous version they have done the performance testing. So we would ask like if benchmark results available, so that if we do a performance test for this new version, you can say, of the application or build, we will be able to know, okay, how much variation is in the performance with the new build, okay, new version. So like we need to ask to clients like what is actually the benchmark available, whether, so that it helps us in test planning of our application. Okay. Next, most important is like on what environment, which environment. Okay. We need to do performance testing. So it can be a QA environment, then dev environment, UAT environment, or the production environment. But mostly we don't go with the production environment. We either do on UAT environment, or they provide a special performance testing environment where only like we do the testing. No other users are involved. No other testing is involved, because for performance testing we need a dedicated environment. Okay. Next most important thing like for a project is the timeline. Like we need to know about the different timelines. Okay, okay, let me take some of the questions some are asking, like it's related to that. So let me think. Okay, please explain once get and post an HTTP request. Yeah, we are going to see when we take up the scripting part. Okay, so don't worry about that. Server configuration will be different across environment. Yeah, that is true, but we need to ask client, give us the environment similar to production. Okay, so UAT environment, if we take for performance testing, it should be similar to production. Okay. So mostly if we say, okay, if it is not similar to the production, then we would tell the client in advance, okay, the results might vary because there is some difference in the environment. So we always highlight the risk to client that some variation in the result might be there if the environment is not similar to the production. Okay. Now as we are seeing, there is another question that is good. What is throughput? It's actually the bytes that we receive from the server. Now, actually what does that mean? Okay, now suppose I am searching something, okay, like Los Angeles, California, United States, and I am searching for 10th of October to 11th of October and I search the results. Okay, so I am posting this request to the server. So in response, server would send something to me. So server sends me byte. So that is the throughput, okay, that we get from the server in terms of response. So that is the throughput. There is another type of test that is volume test, okay. So volume test means mainly we are focusing on the volume of data. Okay, so volume of data, suppose if you want to test hotels.com like 6 months, after 6 months, if the data would be some millions of records in the database. So how your application hotels.com behave when under a particular workload, say suppose 500 we have selected in this particular case. Okay. So volume test would recognize, okay, when a data is populated with this scenario, how the scenario would give the performance. So that is the volume testing. Okay. Volume test to test volume of data in the database. Okay. There are some couple of questions coming in. Okay. We will take up this because that's related to types of performance tests. So like all should understand like which types of performance tests we should do it. So endurance test mainly we focus on when we want to find some issues, memory leaks or any connection problem, and the test we do for longer duration. Okay. So that is the endurance test. So like we do endurance tests to find out mainly the memory leak problem. Like if suppose hotels.com is like executed for like 24 hours continuously under suppose 500 user workload. So definitely some issues would be like popping up. So what would those issues be? Okay, so from endurance tests, we would find out those issues. Okay. Okay, there is another good question coming in. What is spike test? Okay, in what scenario we generally perform spike test? Okay, spike test mainly is when we put sudden load. Okay, sudden load means suppose we are expecting 500 users concurrently. Okay, but suppose I have waited for 5 minutes for like 500 users to initialize, like to load. Okay, and then suddenly I apply the load on hotels.com. So I am giving at the time like speedily the load. So that is spike testing. Okay. So like I put the load, we put the load speedily on the application. So that is spike testing. Okay. So difference between load, stress and volume. Load is mainly we perform under the expected peak load. Peak load, as I said, that during certain period, okay, we know that certain users are coming to our application. So we are aware that, okay, this X number of users, this 500 users are coming to hotels.com on a particular time, like 10 to 12. So that is the peak time. Okay. So load test is mainly used to measure the response time throughput under a particular expected peak load of suppose say 500 users. Then stress test. We are done with testing of 500 users. But what if we increase the users? Like suppose I increase this 500, 600, 700. So at a point there would be some degradation in the performance of the application, or server would stop responding. So that is the stress test. Okay. And next is the volume test. Volume, we are here focusing on large number of data in the database. So like if my database is populated with suppose millions of records, how when I apply load to the application, how would it behave? Like whether it would take time accessing those records in the database, or like what would happen. So that is the difference. Okay. So like next couple of questions we will see. Okay, we will first of all, yeah, the most important thing is the timeline. Okay, timeline of the project hotels.com. So I need to finish it. Suppose start date is like yesterday we started, so 2nd October, and like end date is 31st October or 30th October we can say. Okay. So this is very important to plan our activities for like all the phases of performance testing. Okay. So that this is the most important thing. We should always first of all ask client like what is the project timeline, what they are expecting from us. Okay. So as we have discussed on this environment, we should always keep in mind that this should be a dedicated environment. Okay. Okay. Now, if like even if shared environment is given to you, you have to keep in mind team that we should always do the execution when no one is on the system. Because suppose we want to test with 500 users and suppose 100 users are working in the background, then it would affect your performance of the application. So this should always be kept in mind that it should be a dedicated environment. Okay. Then we have already seen like communication protocol. But if we are not sure, okay, we have just seen the application and not sure, okay, which communication protocol it uses. So we should always ask like a technology and communication protocol used by the application. Okay. Because this is the important thing that would help us in deciding for scripting which protocol should we choose and like which tool we should choose for scripting. Okay, so we should always know like which communication protocol and technology is used by the application. So here in our case is HTTP protocol. Okay. Then we should always ask like performance goal. Okay. So suppose I say performance goal of hotels.com transaction should be less than 4 seconds. So what is transaction? We will see it's set of activity that we do. So we will see in scripting like how to add transaction, how to measure the response time. All those things we would see in the scripting. So that we are starting from the next session, like the how do we like decide on the protocol and like which business scenario we need to script and what transaction means. So all the things we would see. Okay, from the next class. Then important thing is user load distribution. Okay. So this application hotels.com might be used by users from US, might be used by users from India. So it is globally used. Okay. So this is important to determine load generators used for the execution. So what is load generator we will see later when it comes. It's a machine, just a brief, it's a machine that we usually use for pumping the load to the application. Like this machine directly communicates with the app server, web server and the DB server. Okay. So these are like a couple of questions we need to ask to client for like which helps us in test planning of a particular application. So business scenario. Okay. So here we are focusing on search first of all scenario. Search hotel scenario. And suppose we like just click on other scenarios, like we can take as package and flight. Suppose right now just an example. Package and flight. So suppose this to business scenario we need to test. So we need to focus on scripting of this to business scenario, and like we have already the start and the ending. So like we need to complete the scenario, all the requirement gathering, test planning, script creation, script execution and the reporting analysis part. Okay. So all those things we should keep in mind before like proceeding to the scripting part, because it's very important for us to understand like the application. Okay. So we need to understand, like suppose we are not aware of this scenario, how do we proceed? We need to have a knowledge transfer from the application team regarding this scenario, so that it will be helpful to us in scripting those scenarios. Okay, so we have to keep in mind. So also we need to understand architecture of this application. Okay. In this case, as like architecture, we can think of it like a client and its server talking to the web server, app server and DB server. So we should always know, like suppose when I click on search, how does the request flow? So this is useful when we do the execution and if any issues arises during the execution. So we can actually see, okay, the request is flowing from this server to this server, so there might be a problem in that particular server. So we should know the architecture of the server, of the application. Okay. So like whatever business scenario we have, like the client has identified, we should know the functionality, how do we browse through those scenarios. It's very much like important for us to do. So before so that it would be like easy for us to script those scenarios and test for execution. Let's suppose say 500 users as we have right now, or like just assume to be on this particular application. Okay. So these are the set of questions we usually ask to clients. So based on this question, like we prepare a test plan. So we will just have a brief about like what are things we need to include in the test plan, because it will be helpful for you team, like when you get into a project and like you need to do end-to-end testing, right from requirement gathering to test planning, script creation, script execution and the analysis part. It will be very helpful to you, believe me team. So it would be very helpful to you. Okay. So next set of questions, like we can say points that we need to include in our test plan are like the purpose of the application or purpose of the performance testing, you can say. And also the test plan. We can say, okay, it needs to be documented in a proper way and like why we are doing the performance testing. Okay. Next is the objective, as we have seen above in requirement gathering phase, like objective of the performance testing for hotels.com. So we can say, okay, as it is a new application, we need to measure the response time of the hotels.com transaction and it should be less than 4 seconds. So this is the objective of hotels.com application. Okay. Then next is the scope of work. Okay. Like what we are going to perform. So scope of work, like we can say, okay, business scenario, search hotels and like package and flights are in scope of work, and also we need to mention out of scope. Okay. So out of scope could be like you are not doing performance tuning, you are not doing functional testing, you are not doing database testing. So that can be out of scope of a particular application for performance testing. Okay. Okay, there is another good question coming in. What is the difference between the objective and purpose of performance testing? Like here, like objective, we go in detail. Okay, like what are the performance goals available and what are the whether the new application or which new functionality is being added to it. And here we just mention purpose of performance testing. Okay, we are doing this performance testing activity on this particular application. In short, just a brief. Here in objective, we describe each and activity or the objective of the application and also the performance goal. Okay. So that is just you can say a high level description, brief about it. Okay. And here you can just describe it. So even if you like don't mention purpose of performance testing, you need to mention purpose of test plan. Okay. So purpose of test plan is to like document the performance testing activities during the entire performance testing phase. Okay, you can say that. Okay. Then we have seen out of scope. Then next is the monitors. This is important in execution phase. Okay. So as hotels.com, we need to execute for 500 users. We also need to measure the resources of those particular application or the server. So suppose like imagine the application is hosted on this particular machine. Okay, so I will just like open perfmon. This is a Windows utility for monitoring the server. So perfmon would actually like measure the performance of the server. Okay. So here you can add different counters through like plus button, the processor or the memory, provided you have been given admin access to the server. Okay. Or you can use other monitoring tools that are available in the market for monitoring of the application. And if at all you are not provided with the access, admin rights to the server, you can ask the consent team of the application, like the app server team, the web server team, the DB server team, to monitor the application during the execution phase. Okay, so it's very important. Like monitors is very important to so that from this we will be able to find whether any issues are there on the server or not. Okay, so we will during the execution phase, when we take up, we will add up the monitors, some basic monitors, and see like how to actually analyze those counters. Okay. Then next is the environment. As we have discussed in the requirement gathering phase, like what would be the environment? So here you can say, okay, we are doing in a UAT environment. So you can mention here in detail, okay, what environment you are using for the performance testing of the application. Okay, so team, here you can see the importance of like asking these questions to clients during the requirement gathering phase, because it is helpful to prepare the test plan here. If you haven't like understood the requirements properly, then it would be difficult for you to put properly in a document. And because this document is a yes or go ahead to the performance testing activity of that particular project. So according to this document, we need to follow each and everything that is decided between the client and the team. Okay. So you should always keep in mind this document is of very importance. Okay. Then next is the hardware and the software requirement. Okay. So like hardware and software requirement. So how much is the CPU work, or how much memory is on the server, and software, like which tool you are using for performance testing of the application. So in our case, we would be saying, okay, we are using Loadrunner or Jmeter like afterwards for this particular project. Okay, so you have to determine like what is the hardware and the software requirement for the particular application. Okay. Then prerequisites. So prerequisite should be okay. It should be stable. The application should be stable. Manual testing should be completed. This is data should be provided by the application team. So here, keep in mind team, like data is the most important factor for any particular application. So here from this, suppose business scenario, we would be getting an idea, okay, I need the data like destination, hotel and landmark for like performing with different data. Like every user wants searching Los Angeles. Like me, I would be searching some other things, the other user would be searching some other destination. Okay. So either we have to create the data or the client would provide us the data. So we have to keep in mind, okay, whether any dependency is there on data, like if I click on this and this, whether the next would populate or not. So all this data dependency we have to keep in mind, okay, because this is important part in you can say scripting, because when you do execution and like lot of data is consumed and if you are out of data, then it would be a problem for like you during the execution. Your scripts would be failing and all those things would be happening. Okay. Then next are the execution scenarios. Okay, so execution scenarios like my business scenarios like search, hotel scenario and package. Okay, this are this execution scenarios, and like I would be performing suppose load and endurance test for this particular scenario. Okay, so these are the execution scenario. Here we need to find it out. Okay, load test would be like for 1 or 2 hours duration. Endurance test for this hotels.com can be of 10 to 12 hours duration. Okay, so like this is our execution scenario, and like for how many users we would be doing it. 500 V users. Here real users are replaced by virtual users. So we always say, okay, we are executing our test with this many V users. Okay, so this V users, and like endurance test suppose say 100 V users for 10 to 12 hours. Okay, so this is the execution scenario. We should always like decide what type of execution, what types of performance tests we need to perform. Okay, then deliverables. Like what we are going to deliver to client, like test plan document, then scripts, then designing scenario, execution, reporting. Okay, so these are the deliverables that we would be giving to client after the project, like during and after reporting, after our executions are over. So like during this entire performance testing activity, we would be delivering business things to the client. Okay, and lastly we need to mention what are the risks involved, okay, with the application. Like suppose you say, okay, this tool is going to support this particular protocol, but at the end, okay, when application comes to you, you try to record the particular application with the tool, and you find it, okay, you are not able to record, then what? So always highlight the risk to the client. Okay, like if it is a new application, we need to do a POC. Now what is POC? It's mainly a proof of concept. Okay. Okay, so like suppose if it is a new technology, as we have seen, we should know the technology and the communication protocol. So if it is new technology and new protocol, then we need to tell the client, okay, we are new to this tool, we are not aware of this technology and protocol, so we need to do a POC for hotels.com. Okay, so we need to mention all these things to client. Then another risk could be like the network bandwidth. Okay, bandwidth should be maximum so that we don't have any problem during the execution. Executions won't be impacted. Okay, so all these things we should take in mind in designing a test plan, because this goes to client and they provide a final sign off after agreeing to a point. Okay, so this we can say is a important document. Like we have to follow this particular document during the entire performance testing activity. So whatever is mentioned in this particular document, we should always do it. Okay. Here there are some couple of questions. We will take it now. Okay. Could you please elaborate little bit on POC? Yeah, sure. Now, as I said, okay, hotels.com like is a new technology. I'm not aware of which protocol it's using. Okay, so suppose I open Vusion. Okay, that is virtual user generator. That is a LoadRunner component which is mainly used for scripting. Okay, so suppose we open a Vusion. This application is coming to us for the first time. Okay, so okay, we haven't think of okay which protocol and all it's using. So I open Vusion, that is virtual user generator. It's taking time. Now when I click on a new script, okay, there are list of protocols available in Vusion. So I'm not aware of actually which technology and which protocol should I use. Okay, so you should always ask client, and like suppose if you are not aware of technology and which protocol it's being used, you are also not aware of whether the tool will be able to support that particular technology and the tool. Suppose only this many protocols are available, and if you get to know once application comes in, like none of this protocol are working, so what you will do? Okay, so that is the proof of concept. You should tell client that okay, we need to do a POC, that is proof of concept for this new application, as we are not aware of the technology, communication protocol or the tool, okay, what it supports. So we should highlight this thing. So this will require, this won't be a part of this particular thing. So this requires extra time. Like suppose a week activity, because we have to like script, we have to test with 2-3 scenarios. Like it could be a complex scenario, it could be a simple scenario, it could be a medium scenario. So there are 3 types of scenarios. Okay, simple, medium and complex. Okay, so there are questions like what is the advantage of having knowledge on which platform the application is based on? Yeah, that is a good question. Like suppose your application is a Windows based application and is using .NET, okay, communication protocol. So like from this you need to find it out, okay, with .NET there is one protocol .NET, Microsoft .NET. So you would try to record with this particular protocol, and if you are seeing okay this is not able to record, then which other protocol? So like technology and communication protocol are most important thing, like you should know it about, because sometimes what happens, a specific tool won't support a protocol and we have to buy some add-ins or the plugins for that particular tool. So always keep in mind team, you should be aware of it. Okay. There are another question. Is there any LoadRunner framework will be submitted to client? No, there is no framework kind of thing in LoadRunner. We just need to be aware of like what scenarios we are going to test, and based on this scenario we design like this business scenario in the controller. So that is a LoadRunner second component which is mainly used for designing of scenarios. Scenario, like what is designing of scenario? Like suppose these 2 business processes are there, or you can say scripts or test case. Okay, and like I want to execute with 500 users. So it can be divided, like users can be divided equally, either 250 V users, 250 V users. Okay, So this can be the case, or like a search functionality is high critical transaction or high critical scenario which is used by most of the users. So suppose say 400 users are using this, and like only 100 users are using package and flight functionality. So that is that, like, you should know about this thing. There is no framework associated with it. Okay. What is workload modeling? Yeah, that's what. Like suppose there are two scenarios and like 500 V users are there. So how you distribute among these scenarios, that is called as workload modeling. Okay. That is called as workload modeling. That is called as workload modeling. Okay. Now next question is, what is the browser setting required to work with LR? Actually, explicitly we don't need to do any browser settings. There are some recording options and the runtime settings that we would see when we actually take up the Vuegen part. Okay, that is the scripting part. So that we would see. We will take couple of questions, like there are which are like unanswered. How to simulate global hit to a server? As I said, like the users can be distributed globally. Okay, like globally used. Okay, so hotels.com is used by users from US, users from India. So we have to see all the users coming to the application. Okay, so for that reason we need a load generator machine for simulating those kind of global hits. Okay, so suppose 100 users from US, 100 users are from India. So we need two load generators, one from US region and another from India region, because that won't be adding a network latency to your response time. Okay, that's the reason like we simulate like globally using different load generators specific to that particular region. Okay. So we have seen almost all the questions here. Okay. So team, we will see tomorrow. In tomorrow's sessions, the 3 sessions, we would start up with scripting, like few basic scenario of this hotels.com. We would see some of the recording options and like how do we proceed with like enhancement. Yeah, but that would be step by step, because before like recording, we need to see some of the Vuegen like options available for scripting. Okay, so that we would be seeing in tomorrow's session. So team, any more questions on like what we have covered today? Yeah, sure. I think this session would be on the side, and like you would be able to see this particular session. Okay. Okay, there is another question coming in. Calculation of think time and pacing for workload model. Yeah, that we would be seeing once we are done with the scripting part and we go for the execution. Okay, so that we are going to see. Another question coming in is, are we going to follow the same approach for standalone application? Yes, the approach would be same, but like the scripting some of would be different for the standalone application. Like as in suppose a Citrix server. So Citrix applications are mostly based on your mouse coordinates and the keyboard event. Okay, but the approach would be same, like right from the requirement to test planning and all those things would be same. Okay. So workload modeling. Okay. Where to download trial version of Loadrunner? Yeah, I would be like providing the link on this chat so that all would be able to download the trial version of Loadrunner. Okay. Okay. In Loadrunner, what is the maximum V user can be loaded into the application? That is another good question. Okay, that depends on the licensing. Okay, how much license of users you are taking. Suppose we want to run with 500 V users, so we should have 500 user license for the controller part, controller component, because the controller component is mainly used for execution. So that is the license part. Okay, so you can go to any number, like any number of users, but you should have a license for that number of users. So then you can load your application. Okay. For the trial version, like they have provided like 10 to 15 users, V users, we can like run. Okay. Yeah. Will the recorded video for the session be shared later? Yeah, I think you will be able to get this the day 1 and like day 2 video. We can get 1 crore V users. That is not actually possible because 1 crore V users never come like concurrently. Okay, so that huge requirement would never be possible. Like we always arrive at a concurrent users. Like at a time, how many users for a peak time? How many users could be using it? Okay. Another good question coming in, Vusion and controller are separate components. Yeah, they are like Loadrunner is the entire package having different components. Vusion, controller and the analysis component. Okay. No, once you install that Loadrunner package, you would be able to install like Vusion and controller would be present, but only for like 30 days. That is the trial version. Okay. Okay. There is the question difference between baseline and benchmark test. Okay. So that we would cover during the execution. What is the difference between them? Okay. Yeah. I will show you in tomorrow's session all the 3 components properly, like how the look and feel is, and then you will be able to know, okay, these are the components of Roadrunner. Okay. Another question coming in is, how do you simulate globally separated requests at client place considering latency of request, forwarding servers located in different places? How about firewall and security consideration? Yeah, so as I have mentioned, like for global, when we are hitting globally, we need to have a load generator to that specific region so that network latency is not added to your response time. Okay, so in that particular case, we can like hit the application globally. Okay, so like I think all questions have been taken for today's session, and let's meet team tomorrow for the next session, and then we can proceed further. Like tomorrow we will take up the Vusion component. Okay. Okay, great. So we will meet tomorrow 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, and then tomorrow we will see the Vusion component. Okay then. Bye team. Thank you for your time. Thanks a lot. Yeah, sure. Before going, I will just like share the link with you all. Okay. Yeah. I have shared the link with all of you for like downloading the Loadrunner software. Okay, thanks for your time, team. Okay, bye bye.